Good afternoon and welcome again to another edition of Strong at Home. I'm Dr. Brenda Murphy. I'm an educational psychologist with Sail Away Learning and Academy, and we are so glad to welcome you back again today because today we have another treat in store for you to help you be strong at home. Dr. Kathy Greenberg, who has been one of my mentors, is with us here today. Welcome to the program, Kathy. Dr. Kathy Greenberg. Of course, I say Kathy, but it's Dr. Greenberg to everyone else.
No.
Last time you were here, you shared your powerful story with us about how you began your career as a teacher and you encountered a student, Jimmy, in your first year of teaching that changed the trajectory of your life. And like many teachers, we also have encountered many Jimmys in our careers. And some of us just stumbled through trying to find a way out or what to do. And instead, you took a little bit different tact with your life. What was it that happened and intersected your life that changed you from just being a classroom teacher who wanted to do something to someone who was making a major difference in many children's lives?
I was fortunate enough to be in Nashville, Tennessee when Reuven Feuerstein came from Israel with his colleagues and began to teach about his theories related to how people learn to learn. And I found that this made so much difference in my own teaching for my students and helped them to become better learners, that I wanted to share it with many more people, with people who want to become a teacher, already are a teacher, or a parent that wants to help their child, particularly those that have some stumbling blocks in their learning.
Right.
It makes so much difference.
You said something so key when we talked before. You said that part of your work has been turning stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And I love that concept. And I'm sure that every parent, and we know that teachers are also watching, that we want to find ways to take the stumbling blocks and making them stepping stones. And so that is, what are you thinking? When I think about what are you thinking, I think about how many times I have said either verbally to my own children, I confess, I don't think I've ever said it to a student, but I have thought, what on earth are you thinking? And in reality, that's kind of, it's a question that I really want to know a little bit about. And so in our conversation today, we're going to explore what is thinking, and maybe we can figure out what that child or maybe your spouse is really thinking, and a little bit about more how we can understand that. So, what is thinking, Kathy?
Well, one definition that comes close, it's thinking. Let me just start by saying thinking is so much a part of us. We experience it all the time, those thoughts running through our heads that we don't even want to pay attention to, or we find we're paying attention to, instead of what we ought to be paying attention to as we try to do something. They're always there with us. And for many, many years, people have tried to figure out what consciousness is and how that works. But let's go back to just thinking, and then let's try to put the pieces together a bit. So one definition of thinking would be thinking is manipulating information. That's when we form concepts, begin to understand them, engage in problem solving, reason about something, make decisions, make predictions. All those things are a part of thinking, but they're very much influenced by a larger picture.
Sort of like, maybe kind of like this.
If you can see all those images, they show so many aspects of thinking, from a genius physicist, Einstein, his deep level thinking about things that I, for one, have not much information at all about, to Salvador Dali, a famous artist, but his very unusual look at the world as a surrealist. In all aspects of what he brought into his life. Someone studying, reading a book, a little girl who looks like she faces many challenges that most of us in America do not have to face, but challenges of just being fed and clothed and living in perhaps harsh conditions, of a boy who's just daydreaming, of Leonardo da Vinci and a woman in some kind of personal relationship kind of picture, a woman that's painting. There's still a lot of thought that goes into that painting. And then the man in despair. Feelings are so much a part of thinking. So we have to think in very broad terms about what goes into thinking.
Boy, those pictures are just kind of a collage of immediately realizing that thinking is many different levels. And I know for a lot of parents, especially like we focus there on many artists, that very often the ability to think comes out in ways that are not necessarily seen in an academic or a verbal situation, that Salvador Dali and Leonardo expressed deep thinking through the way that they were painting. And so many of our students, even if they don't seem to be able to write the perfect essay, there are other ways that they are thinking deeply and powerfully about their lives. So what are some of the other things that we can think about when it comes to thinking? What are some of the ways that we can be thinking about? It's not just one thing, but it's a lot of things sort of like this.
Yeah, if we look from a biological standpoint, you see there that the word sensations is in red, unlike the other terms, with consciousness in the middle, because that's where our thinking is where we experience our thinking. But sensations have to come first. And then from the sensations, we have a gateway into the mind, and that is perceptions. We don't pay attention to all the stimuli that create those sensations for us. We select, or are without much control, we may select what we pay attention to. Some we're walking along a street and a large dog starts barking at us. We're suddenly paying attention to that and perceiving and then thinking thoughts about, do I need to run? What should I do? Or feelings, I'm scared to death of this large dog that doesn't seem to like me at all.
Yes. Yeah. Or if you're a dog lover, you're thinking about the breed and, could it be a champion dog? There's so different perceptions will differ our many things happening within this brain that we have.
Yeah. I love this quote from a very famous psychologist by the name of William James, who was working back in the late 1800s and into the 20th century. And he says, senses, hearing, seeing, and touching, are only one aspect of the mind, but they are the primal portal, the main way that we get to consciousness from which thinking and feeling arise. The world we practically live in is one in which it is impossible to disentangle the contributions of intellect from those of sense. So if we want to work with our children as parents or as teachers, we have to be paying attention to the sensing, or really to the attention that the child is giving to wherever we want them to go. Feuerstein would whose theory my work is based on, he would say it's a part of reciprocity. Have you been able to get the child to engage in attending to what you think is important in what you want to teach at that moment, in that time?
Yeah, we talk a lot about attention. We've talked about that on Strong at Home, and we will in the future, because attention is a huge part of learning. So as educators, Kathy, kind of our bottom line is learning. And of course, we have to figure out how we think in order to how we learn. They are actively engaged with each other. And attention is huge. In fact, there may be even some people would say a crisis of attention. Many of the people that come to our offices here at Sail Away, my child cannot pay attention. And so in this part of thinking, it plays an enormous role in our ability to think, because if we cannot keep our minds and our brains on something, we can't form the thoughts that we want to think that help us exist more productively in our society. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. You're making me think of a video I saw once of a teacher teaching a lesson to a group of young children gathered around her. And she'd been reading them a story. And one child attended to something that was happening in that story that the teacher was ignoring. And the child brought it up 3 times, and the teacher still ignored the fact that this other thing was happening. There was a cat in the room with a child that was doing something. And then the child got very much off task, began to play with things and bump into the child next to her because no one attended to what she was attending to. No one helped her to get back into what the teacher wanted to focus on in the story that she was reading. So it's very important we realize that we all choose what to attend to. And if we want to reach a child, we've got to be sure we're on the same wavelength. Maybe we need to go with that cat in the room and then pull back into what we wanted to talk about. Or maybe we need to help the child to stop. Don't think about that right now. Please attend to what we're trying to do right here. And help the child to have a strategy for doing that, to get back.
Very important strategies, and we're going to talk some more about strategies. So, and back on our it's thoughts and feelings, perceptions, that our awareness is our ability to maybe think. I know we've talked about consciousness is really awareness of what your brain is doing. Would that be pretty accurate?
Yes. There's so much thinking that we all do that we don't pay attention to. Only if, say, you decide you want to meditate and just let your mind go blank. It's not some people that teach about how to meditate will say it's not about making your mind go totally blank. Unless you were someone who did that all day long, it's probably not going to happen. Instead, it's a matter of being aware that you're thinking and try to then go back to maybe focusing on your breathing and let that go so you can get some peace from all those thoughts. And some of those thoughts, particularly for children that have a lot of stumbling blocks, have to do with I'm a failure, I can't do, I don't fit in. Now here on this slide, we see that some very important things about consciousness that, of course, include thinking that we may need to be aware of, and that is that we might focus on something that becomes a percept or our perception that we're focusing on, and that may be our primary place, but along the margin will be something else, a feeling perhaps. Or we might then switch from the focus to the margin and back and forth, and the margin could become bigger so that we are focusing more there than we are on what was the original focus. Let's say we're in a cold room in taking a course at the university, and at first
that happens.
At first you don't really notice, you get goosebumps or whatever. Eventually you might go, ooh, maybe I'll pull a sweater on here. And then if it goes even further, and so your focus has changed totally from the content of the course to the margin, that what was the margin of being cold, then you finally decide that somebody's got to turn up that thermostat.
Or a solution. Actually, this really happened. One of the classes, the professor brought a stack of blankets to the room because it was a summer class and it was so cold that we were in shorts and short sleeve shirts. And we would come in there and he would start the conversation or the lecture. And before long, everybody's sitting there just shivering and all, and he would just go and distribute one of the blankets. And so we could get back. So indeed, that the margin, and that happens a lot with children, is that really impacts our ability to think. So what I'm hearing you say, that there are an awful lot of ways that our thinking can be impacted in many different ways. And it's our ability to stay focused and to bring different aspects of thinking into our daily lives. And is this another illustration of that concept?
Well, it shows that with the consciousness, that becomes knowledge. Maybe it's knowledge about how to do some lesson in math, or just understanding the history of the United States, for example. But it always goes to action. And another quote that I love from William James says, "No truth, however abstract, is ever perceived that will not probably at some time influence our earthly action. In the widest sense, speech, writing, yeses and nos, and tendencies from things and tendencies towards things, and emotional determinations, in the future and in the immediate present, it must have a practical result." So we always have to be thinking about what is the action that would lead here, especially if we're working with children and we want to help overcome those stumbling blocks, turn them into stepping stones. There is action there.
Yes. And really, the bottom line for what we're doing is educating. And what are our goals for thinking are that we're helping children to be joyous, and when they're thinking, they're active, and then they can apply everything that they have, not only to their classroom learning, but to learning throughout all of their experience. Isn't that right, Dr. Greenberg? Isn't that what really thinking is the bottom line for?
And that's why I so like to think about partnership between parents and school, or family members in school, to include all who give care to children, is that the family members have more opportunity to talk about how it affects your life and not just your schoolwork. Teachers are a little bit more limited in that way. It's at least how to get along with others in the classroom or in the lunchroom. But parents and other family members can talk about it in all aspects of life that are really important. Bring in their own examples from their own work, bring in examples of getting along or meeting new friends, planning a birthday party, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that makes life so much fuller. So thinking is more than just, I don't know, something quick. There's a whole process. And the important thing that I want to take away from our conversation here today, Dr. Greenberg, is that it is not a set in stone, that children as well as adults can learn how to think, and they can learn to think about thinking, which is a compelling idea to me, and one we just don't have time to talk about today, but we're going to talk about in our next session. Will you join us again and expand on all of this learning about thinking that I doubt very many people know very much about? And so we're going to finish for today because we're actually running over time. And we'll finish with, as we always do here at Strong at Home, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Peace to you, Kathy, and to all of you out there. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Peace be with you.